Today's the last day of my look at underrated classics, and I saved the best for last. The setup is a 1949 film noir directed by Robert Wise. As far as noirs go, this is one of the best. Robert Ryan plays washed-up boxer Stoker Thompson, who's just one punch away from the top. After a long streak of losses, Stoker's manager, Tiny, played by Tobias, makes a deal with a gangster to have Stoker take a dive. Tiny decides not to tell Stoker because he figures he'll lose anyway, and he doesn't want to give Stoker a cut of the money. At the same time, Stoker's girlfriend, played by Audrey Totter, has decided to leave him because she's frustrated that Stoker won't throw in the towel and quit. Like I said before, this is a Robert Wise film, and it's actually one of his first films he directed. The camera work is so sleek and smooth, every scene is composed so perfectly that you'd think it was done by a Howard Hawks or a Hitchcock. It was no wonder Robert Wise would end up becoming one of the most successful filmmakers of all time. Robert Ryan delivers what I think is his best performance. Many people prefer him as a bad guy, like in Crossfire or Bad Day at Black Rock, and I love him in those movies, but he's so moving in this picture. His heart is so set on boxing, it's all he knows. To give it up now would be to throw away his dream. It's heartbreaking for him to think that he's all washed up. He's really a good guy too. We want to see him prevail. We want things to work out for him. We want him to make it to the top. He just has such a passion for what he does that it's depressing to think that everything he's worked for would amount to nothing. He loves boxing, but at the same time, it's tearing his world apart. If he keeps doing what he loves, he'll lose the girl he loves. Speaking of which, Audrey Totter does a fantastic job as Julie. She immortalizes the idea of being faithful. She wants to have a better life not only for herself, but for Stoker too. It's not that she hates boxing, she hates what it's done to Stoker. He's all beat up and half the man he used to be. She just wants Stoker back and gives him the ultimatum, hoping that he'll choose her. She decides that no Stoker is just as good as half of him, but when she leaves, she starts to realize that the amount of passion Stoker has for boxing is the same amount that she has for him. Boxing makes Stoker who he is, and their life may not be perfect, but no life truly is. His imperfections make him the man he is. She starts to question whether giving up boxing is truly the right move for the both of them. Now I have to talk about the supporting cast. Holy hell, what a great supporting cast. Every extra, every bystander, every actor serves a purpose in telling the story. They just make the world seem much bigger than it actually is. Stoker sees a little piece of himself in every boxer he shares the locker room with. There's a washed-up boxer named Gunboat Johnson who's obviously seen better days and constantly gets the pulp beaten out of him, and Stoker is scared that Gunboat is his future. There's a young boxer named Stanley, played by a young Darryl Hickman, who's about to have his first fight and reminds Stoker of when he was just starting out. And then there's a boxer, played by James Edwards, who's at the peak of his career, living his glory days. The days Stoker so desperately wants to recapture. The audience is great too. Yeah, the audience. We never get to know their names, but their actions tell their stories for us. There's a man who's watching, who's on the edge of his seat, a fat guy who's constantly eating, a boxing skeptic who later loves it, a sports lover who brings his own radio so he can watch boxing and listen to the ballgame at the same time, and there's a blind man with his friend who describes the match to him. Again, all these side characters just add to the scope of the world Wise creates. It makes it feel more complex. There are so many little touches I find every time I watch this movie. For example, in the beginning there's a newspaper man selling the evening editions on the corner. No one seems to be buying from him. Then a younger newspaper man comes in and people start to buy from him. This is brilliant foreshadow because it gives us a hint of what the film's overall theme is about. We get a taste of the main course before it's given to us. The movie's overall theme is about knowing when to let go. Just like how Stoker is faced with the same questions when it comes to boxing, so does this newspaper man. Also, this makes sense why the newspaper man is rooting for Stoker so intensely during his match. He's going through the same crisis as Stoker, and Stoker winning will not only be good for Stoker, but it will give the newspaper man hope that maybe he can prevail too, and that it's not time for him to hang up the towel. The boxing sequences are masterfully shot too. Each cut feels so clean, and you feel like you're watching a live event on TV. I could talk about this film for hours, but I shouldn't. You should just watch it. However, there is one more thing I'd like to spotlight. This film takes place in real time. The film starts with a clock saying 9:05 p.m., and at the end of the movie it says 10:16 p.m. It just so happens this film is roughly an hour and 11 minutes long. Nice touch, Mr. Wise. Nice touch. This film didn't do very well when it first came out because there was another boxing movie that came out around the same time. Champion. Champion was the bigger hit and launched both actor Kirk Douglas's and producer Stanley Kramer's careers. I really like Champion, but I love the setup so much more. If it hadn't been for Robert Osborne choosing this film on Bob's Picks on TCM, I never would have seen it. I'm so grateful, because not only is this one of my favorite underrated classics, but it's one of my favorite films of all time. I'm hoping that if you took the time to watch this, there's at least one film here that piques your interest. Even if one person watches just one of these movies because of this, I'll be happy. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you found it interesting. Oh yeah, and if there's one movie I could recommend the most, it's The Setup, because, well, you already know why.